Hey everybody, my name is Alex with Hick Hardware, and in this video we are going to go over how to deploy a farmer in Windows 11 using Ubuntu WSL and Docker. So that is a mouthful, but it's really not too difficult if you've been following the guide. And in this specific one, we're going to get the farmer going. So there are some prerequisites though. You should have prepped your disk using the WSL method. You should install Portainer if you want to follow this guide, as that's what I'll be using to manage my Docker containers. You want to have already deployed your node and it should be syncing. Doesn't need to be fully synced, but it should be syncing. And you need to make sure you have the latest GPU drivers installed if you plan to do plotting with NVIDIA. Unfortunately, I don't have any information on AMD cards, but I would check. There's a GPU plotting requirements wiki link down here. I would check that. There's some information on AMD. And then for NVIDIA cards, you need to install the NVIDIA toolkit for Docker. That's going to be in WSL for Ubuntu, and it's super easy. It's just a few commands, and then you'll be good to go. All right. The next thing is we need to just make sure that if you've already deployed your node, you should have this network already created. So just make sure that you have that network created. In fact, I might even remove this section from the wiki because in order to do this wiki, you should have already done your node, and in that step you create this network. So just to be concise, I might remove that. And then we need to identify our disks. So let's go over to Windows. And let's get WSL opened. So we're going to right click, we're going to go into our terminal, we're going to type WSL, and I'm just going to do CD to get my home directory and clear out the screen. And then we're going to do this command, which I'm just going to paste in here, but what it does is basically list out your disks. And if you if you mounted your disks to using a similar convention to mine where you have Autonomys in the name, you can just hit enter and it'll actually print out your disks. If you mounted it to media, you could also just do media, and maybe you have your own folder thing here. Basically, grep looks for a keyword in this command, and if you don't do like grep, just a quick Linux tutorial thing here, you get all this other junk, and it's kind of a pain to look at. Like somewhere in here are our farms, but they're kind of like, I don't know, listed in a chaotic way. So this grep command basically just filters it down to lines that have this word in it. So if you have yours mounted in a different way, that's another, just modify the command as needed. I leave this up because we are going to need it when we deploy our containers, so just leave that up. And speaking of that, we can get right into it and go into Portainer. So I'm going to open up my browser, I'm going to go to localhost, and then I'm going to go into my local instance here. And I have, you don't need NATs actually, that was for the cluster tutorial that I did, but you do need your node up and running, and mine is syncing. I do need to open the ports though, because I don't have a lot of peers, but it's just for this guide that I'm running that node. And we're going to go to stacks, add stack, and we're going to do Autonomys Farmer. And then in our wiki, there's going to be a link to the dockerfarmer.yaml. You can click that link. I'm going to just paste it in right here. And this is a template that we're going to use for our farmer. So let's just copy it. And then we're going to paste it in the web editor. And there's going to be a few things we need to update here. One is you need to make sure that you have the latest version. So if we go to Google and just search Autonomys subspace, oh, that's not what it typically looks like. Just look for the GitHub page. And this brought us right to the releases, but if you go to the main like GitHub, you can see the latest releases, Mainnet 2024, November 06. You're basically going to copy that, come in here, and then paste it right here. And right now the latest version is still the 6th, so I'm going to leave it. Next is you need to set your volumes. So for each disk, you need to create this. So you can just like copy it. So let's say you have 3 disks and then just paste it here. And for each one, you're going to want to, there's a colon here. On the left side, you're going to want to put the path of your disk. So I have 2 disks. I'm just going to copy the first one. And obviously this is already there because I made this guide, and I would just paste that in. and then I would copy this and on the right side of the colon, paste it. So you want left and right side folders to be the same. And what this is doing is saying take this path and mount it inside the Docker container at this path. So now down here, when we reference our disks, we're just referencing where it's mounted inside the Docker container because this command is running inside the Docker container. So it's relative to the Docker container. And this one's already set up as well, so I'm not going to change it. But yeah, 915. You're going to have to update these. So however many disks you have, make sure you have an entry for each of those. And this is going to be mounting those disks into your Docker container. Make sure you should have ports forwarded. 3533 is what the farmer needs to have forwarded. Node RPC URL. So this is where the node is. This is just if I go to my containers here, we can see the node is running on 172.250.100. And we have 172.250.100. So you're putting either, if your node is on the same host and it's running in a Docker container, you can put the IP of the Docker container. Now, if your node is on a different host, a different computer, you would put the internal IP address of that host itself, even if it's running in Docker on another computer. Okay, next is we need to update the reward address. So update it to whatever your reward address is, and then update this. So again, for the path equals, you're just going to put the path on the right-hand side that you have up here. And then for the size, what I do is this command prints out the disk size in gigabytes. And I usually take the size in gigabytes and I subtract 1 from it, and that is what I use. So in this case, I'm going to use 126 because my size is 127. So that'll use up like 99, sometimes 100% of the disk, but this should be gigabytes. I need to update the template for this. If you do just G, it's a different size, and you're probably going to mess something up, or you're going to use way less space actually, because gigabytes is, if I did 126 gigabytes, it's actually like 118 gigabytes. The conversions are such a pain, but just make sure you're using gigabytes here. And then you have your network already set up. We're going to set it to a static IP address for our Docker network. Spaceport is like a monitoring application that I created. You can just delete this out, but if you ever use Spaceport, it's good to have this label in here. And then update the time zone to your time zone. And then we're just importing the network here that we're going to be using. So this is actually, I did the no GPU one. I actually want to use my GPU. So let me go to my files, and I'm going to go to Farmer GPU. And this one also doesn't have the GPU. So hold on, let me, I hate when it does that. Okay, let me grab, I need to do some updates to these files because they are not set up correctly. Okay, so by the time you go through this guide, this will be set up correctly. I'll have a link to the GPU and non-GPU. But for me, I'm going to have to paste this in. So this imports the GPU into my Docker container using the runtime for NVIDIA runtime. So my GPU will be good. Like I said, you won't have to do that step. It'll already be in the Docker containers if you're doing an NVIDIA GPU. And then we just do deploy the stack and address already in use. What address am I doing? 101? Hold on. Oh, that's because Nats is running. I'm just going to remove that. We don't need it. And I think it'll let me deploy it now. Okay, so I just needed to remove Nats. We don't need Nats anymore. That was for the cluster, like I said. Now we can go into our stack. So when it launches, it'll bring you back to the stacks here. Just select the Autonomys Farmer. We can go in here and we can see that it's connected to the node. It is going to be, so if you see this log, using CUDA GPUs, used CUDA devices equals 0, it actually means that it is using the GPU. Let me I had to disable auto refresh or else it keeps moving the cursor. 0 just means device 0. So the first GPU, if you have two GPUs, it'll say 0, comma 1. And so that's technically two devices. And then you also see that CPU plotting was disabled due to detected faster plotting with GPU. So the CPU will be disabled by default. You want that. You don't want to use CPU plotting and GPU plotting. Typically, that's going to slow everything down. The disks are going to be imported here. We can see my two disks. And then right away, it's going to claim that, let me turn auto refresh back on. It's going to claim that it will start plotting, but you're not going to see any progress until the piece cache syncs. So when your disks, let me just do ls-l media autonomous farm. So there's a piece cache that gets created. It's 1% the size of your disks, and this needs to sync typically before plotting starts. I don't know if it'll always be that case, but right now what I've noticed is you're going to see a percent, like 0% complete, 5% complete, 10% complete. That piece cache has to fully sync before you're going to actually start seeing plotting. So if you launch your farmer and you see plotting sector and then you don't see one for like another 30 minutes, hour, um, just pay attention to your piece cache synchronization. And once that completes, you should see the GPU spin up and to start plotting. So don't worry, it can take some time. Okay, I think that is it. There will be replotting, so I mentioned it briefly, but you're basically plotting archived history, and sometimes sectors go stale because they want people to replot with the new history. So once you finish your initial plotting, you may see it starts doing replotting right away. That is totally normal and expected. As the archived history grows, the replotting is going to happen less and less. Okay, so here you can see the piece cache start to sync. I'm at 0%. It's going to take a little while. It does take a little while. So just hang tight until that piece cache finishes syncing. If it's going really slow, check the Discord or search in Discord like speed up cache sync, and you'll probably find some people who have increased their connections for their container. I'm not going to cover it in this guide, but it's one way to potentially speed up the piece cache sync. And oh, so one other thing is right now we have two stacks. We have a farmer and a node. It is possible that you could put them all in one. So if we go to the autonomous files, I have a bunch of different templates here. There's a node farmer combined. And what this does is put the node and the farmer in the same stack file. So it's really up to you. I usually like to have them separate, but you can put them into a single stack file instead of having two separate stack files. Personal preference, I like to have them separate. So that'll be it for this one. Hopefully it was helpful. If it was, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next video.